Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Activities for People Living at Home with Dementia. We are proud to offer this series with funding from the Area Agency on Aging and the United Way of Tarrant County. These programs are recorded and are made available for viewing through a YouTube channel for future use. I am Martha Brown, your host for today's activities. We are presenting today Peggy Spear with the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. Peggy is bringing us art from the earth, and that sounds exciting to me. Peggy, please show us some earth pictures. And we can take ourselves off mute if you want to now. Thank you.
All right, so when I was putting this together, I initially thought, all right, I'm going to go through our collection and see what artwork we have that are made of things directly from the earth. And looking at those artworks, we've already reviewed a lot of them. So the focus will be on a special exhibition that just opened in December entitled In Isolation. And it's a show of one artist. Her name is Sandy Rodriguez, and she lives in LA. Here's old Sandy right now. Sandy's on the left, and our curator Maggie is on the right. I just texted Maggie. I said, hey, Maggie, can you text me or can you send me any pictures you might have with you and Sandy? And she sent me some of the most ridiculous pictures of them, like in the gallery doing all these poses. I'm like, I just need something normal. So here's another one of them just really hamming it up. They're like resting on each other at one point. I was like, okay. So Maggie has a good sense of humor. But here's Maggie, our curator, and the artist, Sandy Rodriguez. Like I said, she is based in LA, originally from San Diego. So she is California through and through. And she, the artworks in this particular exhibition are from a residency that she had at, it's called the Joshua Tree Highlands Artist Residency that started almost exactly as COVID hit. So the title In Isolation refers to kind of two things that are happening at once. One, she's in the desert completely by herself, living in this ranch. And where it was the same time that we were in lockdown, that she was producing a lot of these artworks. So this double entendre of In Isolation. So she, her artworks, her background is typically, she's really interested in creating things that are rooted in maps, in nature, in history, in the border. You can kind of see there's a map in the background that is of California, but it deals with, there's people protesting at the border into Mexico. So she's really interested with the lands, the original owners of lands or inhabitants of lands, not necessarily the Western story of whose land it is, but the indigenous story of whose land, and those mythologies, things like that. So her work is really cool. So so those are kind of the themes she's addressing, but this of the earth part comes from she's making her own pigments out in the desert, and she's working on a mate paper. Have any of you ever heard of a mate paper before?
No, how do you spell that?
Oh, I want to make sure I'm spelling it right. A-M-A-T-E, I think is how you spell it. So a mate paper, yeah. A mate paper is, here, I'm holding some up. It's hard to see with this lighting. It's handmade paper that is made from bark of fig trees, mulberry, other various plants and fibers. She is not making the paper. She is working with a 5th generation family of the Atomi in Puebla, Mexico, that is making the paper. So that paper she brought with her, but it's all completely handmade paper from fibers, and the color of the paper can vary depending on what natural pigments they're putting in. You might add more iron, you might add ash, depending on what fibers you're choosing from. You can alter the color of the paper. The paper itself, as you can kind of see in this really crummy lighting, there's different, you can see fibers that have started to separate and spread out. So a lot of what Sandy does is she plays with those variations within the paper to create different effects.
They had the same type of paper in Thailand. Called saw paper is what the name of it. And up in Chiang Mai, they actually have people that produce it. Of course, it's a touristy area, so my daughters could go and you would watch them do the paper, and then they let them help them do the paper. Okay. And they put all of this in a big slurry. Okay. And then kind of pour it onto a screen and let it kind of dry out, and then press it down. You know.
Yeah, that's similar to the process that they're doing to make this paper as well. There's a lot of, they boil all of the fibers together. Then they're using volcanic rock to hammer everything out. And then they lay out the paper in the sun to naturally dry. And we asked Sandy, because she's not the one making it, but she's, you know, having this other family make them for her. We said, how long does it typically take? And she goes, I don't know. If people ask, just say a long time. So that's the official answer from the artist. But
I think it takes several days at least to dry out.
Yeah, she said if she were to guess.
And I think there's still another process after that drying process normally, that they do something else with it.
She didn't mention it with this particular paper process, but that's not to say it doesn't exist. It's kind of thicker paper. It's, you know, almost, she compares it to the thickness of denim. I wouldn't say it's as thick as denim, but, you know, it does have a cushy thickness to it.
It's very rough.
Yeah, this one side is extremely smooth. The other side does have some texturing to it, kind of, you know, like you can think of handmade paper or just that papyrus, whatever you might have felt in the past of handmade paper. It has that same texturing to it, but one side is very, very soft, smooth. So I think she's typically painting on the more textured side to collect water, the pulling of water, things like that. So you can kind of see the different, she's using amate paper and everything you see, but you can see the variation. Hey, Yada, hey, Hans.
Hi, hi. Hello.
We are focusing on an exhibition that's on view right now in the museum by an artist, Sandy Rodriguez, the woman standing on the right. And this is the curator of the exhibition. Her name is Maggie. And so we're just kind of talking about the setup of what this exhibition really is focusing on.
Okay.
So with the amate paper, this is the paper that she's creating on. You can see the variation in color, in tone. These are huge. And if you were to go buy this paper at, you know, like a specialty store, we got a piece of a sheet that wasn't, you know, probably 3 feet by 2 feet, something like that. And it was almost $40. It's very expensive for this type of paper. So, but the paper, this is the actual paper she was using. She gave education pieces of it to use for tours and things like that. So anyway, but you can buy that paper yourself. Right now, I think it's kind of hard to find, just I think because of supply chain situations, like everything else in the world. Okay, so Maggie had heard about Sandy right before COVID, reached out to her. Sandy's doing this residency in Joshua Tree, and then everything shuts down. So Maggie and Sandy are really only in communication through Zoom, through phone calls, through email. It wasn't until almost over a year and a few months later, when everyone's vaccinated and the whole bit, there was a little time when we weren't wearing masks, Maggie went out and visited Sandy. So that was the first time they met in person. So here's just a little more context of what the exhibition looks like in its space. It's kind of in like a shotgun little gallery alley. It's about 35 artworks, I want to say, of variety in size. So the first artwork we'll kind of take a minute with is this, and you can see it just for size reference. It's this first image on the left. Okay, it's called Collecting Color. So the title kind of gives us some context. What do you see happening here?
picking of flowers or herbs or something to make the dyes or the
Yes.
paint. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is a self-portrait of the artist Sandy. So you saw what Sandy looked like. Different hair color at the time, but this is who the artist is. And so this is a portrait of her collecting pigment, and she's playing off of the Florentine Codex. Have any of you heard of the Florentine Codex? Okay. For those of you who haven't, the Florentine Codex was written in the 1500s by a Spanish Franciscan friar who was in the New Spain in Mesoamerica, working with the indigenous Aztec and other people who were living, other tribes that were living in that area. It's over 2,000 pages, and it's kind of the universal history of that part of the world.
Wow.
It's considered one of the most important documents of pre-Columbian, essentially pre-Columbian America. And so it's called Florentine Codex because the best version of this document lives in Florence. Yeah, Italy had nothing to do with why it's called, it's because it's living there. It's a Spanish man in Mesoamerica writing in Spanish and Nahuatl, which was the native language of the people living in that space. And so in this 2,000 plus page book, there are over 2,000 images that were created by students of that Franciscan friar. And it's talking about the economy of that part of the world, the mythology, the art, the religious practice, everything that made that part of the country what that was. And it was kind of a history of it. It was written over many, many decades by this, until he died, he was writing in this. And it was in Spanish, and then it wasn't translated until much later into English. She's very aware of the people who would be living in the lands that were in Joshua Tree, the national park. That's what the Skull and Bones is, that reference to people past. She's dressed as if she were of the people of that time, this kind of white linen dress. But then she's got a mask on. So it's this wedding of the past and the current. And this connecting of, this is what it was and this is what I'm doing, but now I'm wearing a mask, and this is all quickly evolving over time, or over, how things kept changing in the beginning, because this is when she was painting it. She had no idea what to expect when she was out of isolation, how the world would return, but was very interested in the marriage of what was and what is. And this book, the Florentine Codex, which she's very influenced by, was written during another plague, the bubonic plague. So there's kind of that overlap of influence too, that again, this is centuries and centuries of difference. But some things don't change, and history is repeating itself. And here we are watching her collect things to make pigments, again, a practice that had been done in a modern world.
Of course, in without that context of COVID, somebody looking at that might say, well, that mask is protection because of the oils and the aromas the plant is giving off. It's like when I do wood turning, there are some pieces of wood that you have to wear a mask because they're hazardous to your breathing, to your lungs.
Yeah.
They're beautiful wood, but they can cause a lot of respiratory problems. So somebody in the future would say, oh, well, he's just a person protecting herself from, from that,
Right. Yeah. If she had showed the people of the 1600s, they might not have even thought twice about the mask.
Right, yeah, and they wouldn't.
That's right.
No.
But for our contemporary eyes, it's immediately associated with COVID,
Beautiful picture. Beautiful picture.
It's very beautiful. And she's she's referencing too, there are images in the Florentine Codex of these scribes that would make these scenes of what collecting color looked like, of what collecting pigment looked like. So there's that, again, that referential history to the codex, but it stands alone. You don't need to know that to understand what's happening. So oh, go ahead.
So, Peggy, I noticed that there's a skull and a couple of bones over in a mound.
Yeah.
Is that significant to the paint, to the drawing?
So the reference of the people whose land it was before she got there.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm.
So, oh, go ahead, Yetta.
It's just a little weird to me, you see the girl and the little bush and the little mountains as if you're looking straight at them. And then the other background looks as if you are up above it and you're looking down and there's a river running through it. It doesn't look like the sky or anything, it's all just the same color.
Yeah, it does have, especially because of the paper tone, some of that perspective is lost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. So she's collecting pigment. There's a portrait of her collecting pigment. Here is what she had in her studio she's collecting native plants to Joshua Tree to create her pigments. So here she has the different names and all the different languages of the different peoples that have lived on that land. So it's in Spanish, Nahuatl, Latin, and English. And then on the other side, there are the medicinal and utilitarian purposes of these plants.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. So you can see in this picture back here, you can see it's pretty big.
Yeah.
You just have it pinned, hanging from the wall. Mentioned off, so curious hands don't touch.
It's nice that you have that perspective. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I know. So it's so hard when you're seeing something on the wall, you have no idea the size. So this is just kind of where you're understanding what her working process is. Again, very tied to the codex because it's talking about the function of plants that were native to the land. She said that she views herself as a desert person. That's where she feels at home because she grew up in San Diego. She's used to that kind of arid, dry, the ability to hit a desert and you're, an hour away from where you live. So she always felt at home in the desert. When she's working in these southern western states, and she's in isolation in these different, deserts or parks, she makes it a point to understand the flora and fauna of the area. And she works with scientists, things like that, to really understand the place well. As a result, she's able to make her own pigment. So on the left, you can see her color chart of what colors she was able to make with the things that she was able to find in that part of the world.
How cool.
Isn't it so cool?
Interesting. Yeah.
We have our exhibition designer is a watercolorist himself, and he was like geeking out over this. Like, oh my God, this is so cool that these are the colors she's making from the different.
Does it say which plants or which stuff
yeah, if I remember correctly, she has like the list of what's making what.
Okay.
The little writing, and then you're able to see what the powdered pigments are.
Yeah.
So once she has everything, you've got her pestle and mortar. Once she has everything, she would go out and collect cochineal and different flowers, things like that. And then that's where she would create kind of her color palette then for that would reflect the land she felt most accurately. And so what she would do is she would use these paints, fugitive paints mean after a while they will start to disappear because they're completely organic.
Yeah.
So she would use these fugitive paints, but also go in with real watercolors because she's worked in museums herself for a very long time. So conservation loves her because she was able to kind of conserve her own artwork ahead of time by going in and using the synthetic watercolor under. She would try to color match almost exactly so that there was that trueness to the color she's using.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, it's like so much science when she was explaining it. I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain. So she told one of the educators in the department how to make some of the colors. So she got cochineal and she ground them all up. And I have a video. I'm just going to kind of jump through because it's only a 5-minute video, but it turned into like a science lab in a couple of weeks ago, because Allie, the educator that's standing right here, is using all of the different things to create that Sandy used to create paint. So she's using cochineal, which is the bug, only female bugs produce that vibrant red color. So you can think of any artworks you might have seen in medieval time. This is something from this part of the world. They eat paddle cactus, and that's what makes them turn red. So when this was discovered, this was now impacted art throughout the entire world. So this is really cool that this is coming this part of the world. So she herself would go and collect the cochineal, and only the females produce this red. And so it's totally non-toxic. Lipsticks used to be made, or can be made from this, used to be made from this. Makeup, paints, you name it. Fabrics were dyed using this. And then she's got the binder. So every paint has a pigment and a binder. And the binder can change depending on what's available. But she's using gum arabic, and then she's using different acids to kind of change the colors of the red to make it deeper or lighter. So I'm just going to kind of skip through, and there's no sound because there's like all of us fools talking in the background about like, oh, what did you guys eat for dinner last night? Like, it's totally unprofessional. But we'll just kind of hop through. So she's got a scale. She's measuring different natural pigments that what is it, like dirt type things to
Wow.
Okay, so we'll kind of jump forward. So now she's adding this is not the citric acid. These are two different, the gum arabic, that binder. So she's adding that. Then she's going through and telling us what these aluminum sulfate and the other powder does to kind of help the everything congeal. I think there's a name for it. Mordant, I believe, is the name. Okay, so she's still adding. Now she's got hot water. And this is like truly, if conservation knew what we were doing in the building, they'd probably be like, oh, maybe we don't do that. So now she's mixing. She's added the cochineal. She's mixing everything together. And it looks pretty brown, but it isn't. And then now she's adding the sulfate, aluminum sulfate, and this is what's going to make it. You don't have to strain it or anything. Or no, maybe this is the gum arabic, and then she adds. She's going to add that. That's the sulfate, and this is what's going to make it that purple color, and you can start to see it changing.
Oh, see that?
Magic.
Yeah.
It's magic.
And then
It's chemistry.
Yes, it is. It's chemistry.
To me is magic because science doesn't compute in my brain. So, and then now she's adding the citric acid, which is what you can do to lighten the color. So you can see it went from a purple to kind of a pink.
Bye, folks. I've got to go.
I see.
Thanks, Steve. See you later.
All right.
So we now have jars of cochineal ink that we've been using for art making here at the museum.
So is that material something you can put in a bottle and save and use it for several things, or?
Yeah, you can. So she didn't make, you can see it looks all blue, but it's probably up to here.
Okay.
You know, and then I think she adds the hot water in, more hot water in, I think to dilute it, but to make more of it. And then now, I don't know how long it lasts, but she made a lot. So if it doesn't go bad, so to speak, it would last us a long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you put the right binders and things in it, that should
Yeah,
make it last
so
longer.
it's very work intensive. It's very chemistry centric, as you saw. So, but Sandy's doing that for all of her pigments, collecting the color and then making her paints. And so there's a bunch of little studies she does in the exhibition that she's prepping for her larger map that we saw in the beginning that was off of her Maggie's shoulder. But here is a Joshua tree. It's, you know, not huge. I don't have it. I didn't put the picture of it on the wall. And then here she has the names in Nahuatl, I believe, Spanish, and Latin. That's what the writing is. Yeah, and in English, you can see it here, the title of it.
Now, one question, since we didn't come in, does she make her own paper because it's so uneven?
She does not make her own paper, but she's working with a family out of Puebla, Mexico, who's they're an Otomi family, 5th generation paper makers. So this is all handmade, but she's not making them herself.
But she's not, okay, all right.
So you can see, yeah, you can see the inconsistencies in toning and edging, things like that. But she's working in standard sizes. This was kind of funny because she was working in isolation. Our curator was never able to meet her. And we did not know, we weren't sure when we were going to be able to be back on site. She had to work in standard sizes. So we knew we had frames that could fit her stuff. So that was a situation where function had to dictate the creativity.
Okay.
Smart.
So Peggy, can we go back to that one? So is the brown color really just the paper color as it comes out that's in the background?
Yeah, like this is brown and this is brown. Yeah, like you can see she works with it deliberately. So some of it is masked, some of it is up. So yeah, it's a very deliberate choice on how she those details. So the last, I think this is the last image. Yeah, I adore this image. So this is, it's let me go back and I'm going to give you quick whiplash. We're going to go back. You can see the artwork here on the walls for size.
Okay.
Again, she's working within a standard frame, so it's not massive. But here is, she did several nocturnes during her time at Joshua Tree. And she loved it because she was out of LA. There was no light pollution. She was able to see every, she said, comet and star and just any celestial thing that, again, if you're, mimicking whatever was happening with the people who are creating the Florentine Codex, your entertainment was the sky. I mean, you knew you were measuring seasons and days and weather, everything was going, everybody was looking up to the sky. So this is that, this idea of mimicking that life that was done centuries and centuries and centuries before, again, in a contemporary time. And then you see the gold flecks, the gold stars. She's using 24 karat gold there to give it a little luster. And you notice this sweet little bunny. So she, again, the Florentine Codex has a lot of bunny imagery that is referenced. And then cave paintings in the area have bunnies on. So bunnies were something that were of interest and meaning to the people in this part of the world. But she said from a personal, again, merging the past with the present, she was in isolation and was getting to know the animals around her really well. So she at night would, the bunnies would come and she would feed them. And then in the morning, the bunnies would come and she would feed them. So she ended up having, she said, these friends that she made that were all these bunnies who kind of helped her through the loneliness of COVID. And so she said she felt she needed to include them in this view of the desert because they really were such an important part. Yeah, it's so sweet.
This is an interesting piece.
Sweet.
The gold paint or the gold was it what you call it, gold leaf?
I think it might actually be like she melted down the gold and then painted with it.
Wow.
But I'm not 100% sure, but it's true gold.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it represents the stars and not any flowers during the day.
No, like the total beauty of the nighttime sky, which she said she's just always been attracted to. And the bunny too within the Florentine Codex different positions mean different things to mythology or whatever. And so here she included the bunny in this direction because she said that was her positioning, looking at the moon at certain times of the night. So that was to represent her placement on the earth in relationship to the moon. But it's so stinking sweet. So I just,
Yes, it is.
It's a nice one. Yeah, yeah.
so those are there are a lot more artworks that are really powerful in this exhibition. A lot of them are some political charge to it, helicopters, people protesting, because she was in isolation and still getting the news with all of the police demonstrations that were going on, things like that. So you can see in one of them, I don't have the image of it, it's a bunny in the desert and the sun's coming up, but the sun is the COVID-19 ball we all became very familiar with. So she's got a sense of humor about it, but she's also dealing with really heavy issues of land rights, of human rights, and things like that.
So
Before
Peggy,
you go, go in.
go ahead, Jetta.
Before you go, those big paintings where she was standing there with your curator, were they maps?
Yes. So all of the studies that here I can show y'all again. All of the studies that she was, the little drawings like of the Joshua tree we saw here, were of, so like these were studies that she was doing to eventually put in the bigger map.
Okay.
So she was figuring out the animals and the land and the light and all of that to eventually then make a bigger version of a Joshua tree, or to incorporate some of those details in her. So they're like studies almost of the what the larger was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so the California thing, you've got, a police car that's on fire. You've got children protesting outside of a detention center. So again, they're beautiful, but very heavy. You see in some of the nocturnes, maybe, you're not seeing it here on the wall, the next wall over, there's nocturnes of the, a Joshua tree landscape at night, but then you see helicopters flying overhead, and that can be all of the different things that were going on with social justice and the wall and the whole bit. So she's very aware of, again, the past and the present.
So Peggy, my picture in my mind is that she's living in an old trailer with a TV antenna sticking up, and
that would be the impression. No, for this residency, she was on a 5-acre ranch with a library and Wi-Fi and so she was living that cush life. But in other instances in her life, when she was painting these desert scenes, she would pack in for 2-3 weeks at a time and then pack out and just get what she needed, really live and learn the land before she felt comfortable, and drawing all day out in nature, and then coming back to her studio to create these larger images.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
That would be an interesting snippet.
No, I'm glad you all, if you get a chance and you're in this neck of the woods, these works are they're works that I would want in my home. They're just so beautiful. But it will be up until probably, I want to say, April or May. So anyway, next week we're back with green in honor of St. Patrick's Day. We're not doing any Irish, but we're doing a lot of green. So
all right.
See you all next week then, okay?
Peggy, thank you very much.
Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Bye.
Well, heaven bless Peggy. She's going to do this 2 more times today.
Oh, wow.
She's going to do this at 11:30 and at 1:30. So if you didn't get enough, you can come back.
Yeah.
And also, tomorrow is Frog Bingo at 10:30. So we can build on what we started on March 3rd. And tomorrow, 11:30 and 1:30, Tony Palos piano.